Good morning. Good morning, and welcome to another episode of Gather for Her. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, we're gathered to listen to the collective wisdom that comes through on this conversation. Super excited that you're here this morning. Super excited for our guest today. And I'm Charlene Sinjenko, and I'm pleased to be hosting you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish First Nations on the beautiful Sunshine Coast on the west coast of Canada. And I'd like to introduce you to my co-hosts and my braid. And I'll just ask them to introduce themselves to you this morning. Do you want to kick it off, Christina?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm pleased that you're here, and I am joining you from Golden, BC, which is also the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap peoples and the Columbia River Métis. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I'm just surprised every time how amazing they are. And I'll pass it over to Sharon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Marshall. For those of you who don't know me, I am Métis Cree, and I am here in Lanceville, BC, on Vancouver Island, on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw and Snuneymuxw First Nations. And I'm super excited to be here as well. And I'll pass it off to Tina.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I love Wednesday mornings. Welcome to Gather for Her. I'm Tina O, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm calling in from Naquetaquam, also known as Bowen Island, on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Squamish people. I am a story keeper here with Powerhouse. I'm an artist of impact, and I represent the holder of the kind of the liminal space that we're all in, and listening and tracking the clues that are in the conversation. And it's a pleasure to be here. Let the listening begin. Back to you, Shar.
I wanted to just open up the conversation with two parts. One is a question around practice and performance for Christina, and then the other is tracking the story thus far, and what's coming through from Tina and Sharon. Christina, I think I'm going to just make a statement and then get you to, ask you to riff on it a little bit, because people always do say, well, what's gather for her? Why do you gather? And I try to explain to them that it is kind of like going to church, but not church. And basically how it is the practices and the rituals that we hold most dear and precious to us that make us the leaders who we are, those intentional, deliberate practices. And for me, the practice of meeting for conscious conversation with like-minded, brilliant, people on Wednesday mornings has been pretty transformational over the past year. We're coming up to a year, April 1st. And I think it's quite incredible that the woman that kicked us off, Jayanne Guilfoy, was actually the woman that referred and introduced us to our guest today. So I just love, as you know, I love the full circles. So what are your thoughts? Like, why do we gather? Why do we bother in everything that's going on right now?
Well, there's a couple things actually that you said that I want to pick up on, and that is conscious leadership and conscious conversations, and that we're gathering to expand our collective wisdom. So we're hearing from people from all walks of life and traditions and experiences. And when we have these conversations, they're very rich and deep, but they're also purposeful. And what I notice, particularly in the development of the conversations, is that, if you watch the chat, and I often don't pay attention to the chat just because I don't want to get too distracted, but every once in a while I'll look at the chat, and there's a sharing that goes on in the chat that you can tell that different pieces of wisdom are landing in people's consciousness and transforming their way of thinking. And then in the transformation, it's rippling out, and you can tell in people's lives because we're connected to one another. Who the people that are participating in these conversations, there's a connection, and we talk to one another, and they'll be like, something I took from this conversation has actually had this ripple effect in my life in different ways. And so the word conscious conversations, the word and then the ritual, right? It is a ritual for us to meet weekly, and so there is an honor that comes with that. The honor that we have that you're showing up. Like I'm looking, there's 80 people, and we started with maybe 15, and 80 people are showing up to these conversations on a regular basis because it's that ripple effect. And so it's worth people's time to take those little micro steps of showing up and being present, and then sharing, like drawing from the wisdom that's spoken, and then sharing in the chat that is leading to an elevated level of consciousness that I'm very honored and humbled to be part of. And I don't say that lightly. Like I don't use those words in a trivial manner. So.
Very well said, Christina. Very well said.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'm going to just lean over into Tina and Sharon, and because I think, we've done this long enough to know that this is one continuous conversation from she for her. We are all, we're all vessels week by week. What's going to be said today? What is it? What's the message we're meant to hear today? And Tina, I was wondering if you, as the story keeper and tracker, what's this, the story's on the move, as you always say, like what feels like the story that's on the move leading up to today, just after International Women's Day, March the 10th. Here we are. Spring is springing. Just curious.
That's a beautiful question. And there's many layers to it. As you know, I tend to listen on 3 levels of time. And what I'm noticing is that in all of the conversations, there's the friction of I want, with the patience of what is ready to unfold, with the wisdom of the integration between those 2 places. And on the edge of International Women's Day, I don't know if you've noticed, but even the conversation of International Women's Day in our social media feeds is very different. There's multiple perspectives about it, and yet very, very, very passionate perspectives about it. I notice in our Gather for Her conversations that this group, like the 4, the 5, that all of us here, all the 80 of us here, we tend to root in. We're rooting in on the collective pulse of us, which I notice is making room for the things that are resistant and has multi perspectives to talk about. And we're starting to be more brave and more kind with our bravery as we talk about the sticky bits, because there's as we know, there is pain in the world, and there's also healing in the world, and we don't get to have one without the other. They're ultimately connected. So I would say it's the drive of humanity and the bravery to walk into the sticky places and learn how to talk about them kindly.
Women are ready. You're right. Women are ready. We're ready to be heard. And we're ready to lead with authenticity.
Oh, so great. Okay, so we're ready. And with that, without further ado, thank you all for being here as the co-host for this co-created conversation. And our very special guest today was referred to us and introduced to us by a mentor and a dear friend. I'm going to read a short bio before I bring Marina up to our virtual stage. Marina Glogovac is an amazing leader. She is the president and CEO of an incredible organization called Canada Helps. And she has been in her position at Canada Helps since 2013. And since that time, through a combination of her leadership and her expertise and her gifting, she has actually tripled the donations that have been received. And Canada Helps is an incredible catalyst for charities who play such an essential role in Canada around taking care of our communities. So through cutting edge technology and high quality education and communication, she's been just able to do incredible things for impact. Marina has been a technology and media executive for more than 25 years, and she believes that leadership is a calling and a responsibility. And I just can't think of a better, more amazing guest to have during the week of International Women's Day, to have a discussion about leading beyond belief, rewiring our internal responses, than with Marina. And I'm just going to invite her onto our stage this morning. I'm so excited to have her join us. And we will just give her a moment to reconnect. So great.
And I've just added the link to Canada Helps there.
Oh, thank you, T. Great. We're just connecting digitally here. We'll just give it a minute. Good morning, Marina. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Hi, guys. I feel very honored and privileged to be here. So thank you.
Oh, I was just reflecting before we started this morning about just the call and the responsibility that you feel to leadership, because that feels like a kindred spirit to me. I feel a deep sense of responsibility, and I wondered if, our theme, for this season of Gather for Her is this leading beyond belief. And I wondered if you could maybe start by speaking around how that sense of responsibility is planted or seeded in you, like how that feels and where it came from, and what does that feel like now in this journey that's brought you to 2021 around the concept of leading beyond belief?
Thank you. I think there is so much to unpack there, that it would be the intersection of personal, archetypal, societal, universal, spiritual. I think for me, having come and having emerged into this world from a very broken community right after the Second World War, and lots of death, lots of suffering. My family emerged on the losing side, so we were the dissidents in a kind of the political structure. And right away, there were two strong female women in my life. My grandmother, who suffered just like incredible hardship, and my mom. So I think when I was very little, two things happened. The first thing is that I saw them, I saw the pain, and I saw their power. And I always said, sorry that I'm crying at the beginning of this, when I think about my grandmother, I think of a paradox of vulnerability, extreme vulnerability, and extreme power at the same time. And it is a paradox, right? And so the modern, Brennan and the vulnerability, the strength in vulnerability, I feel like I grew up with that because I grew up with two women who pushed against all odds, who worked hard to transform their own darkness into the light for others. And seeing them did two things. First, it inspired me to want to change the world. And I think at the real heart of leadership is wanting to change the world. It has nothing to do with jobs or roles or corporations. It really is recognizing our own inner ability to change the world, to lead, and to have that agency, right? To have that agency. And I think as women, we often lose that. We lose the warrior side of women, right? The women, the wise woman, the mother, but the warrior side has been, oppressed, suppressed, buried. So I think for me, I was 5 or 6 and I said, I want to make the world a better place. And that to me is a leadership. I mean, that is the essence of leading. The essence of leading is not agreeing to status quo. The essence of leading is about pushing yourself to make those changes personally and offering yourself almost sacrificially, right? Because leading is not comfortable. The moment you step on that path, you better believe that there will be so many challenges, so many negative, spirits trying to take you away and lure you with, and you lose your way. I lost my way many, many, many times. But I think where the responsibility comes in for me is early on. When you are on the path of leadership, you are on the path of self-transformation, or else you're not on the path of leadership, right? The leadership and the self-transformation come hand in hand. So once you're a leader, and even more so if you come into a position of kind of external leadership, you're leading the company or the team, your responsibility for your own inner change and development and learning just becomes magnified 100-fold. Meaning that, again, if you're a leader and if you're not intensely self-reflecting, and if you're not engaged in a practice of introspection and trying to make yourself a better person, that is a huge responsibility. To be conscious. When you're a leader, you have to work relentlessly on raising your own consciousness first and being honest with yourself. And so much of that work is very uncomfortable. So I see first the leadership as something that we all have. I see leadership as the responsibility for us to change. Ultimately, I do believe that as we change, the world changes. I'm often angry. I'm that person who says, I want to be a revolutionary. I want to be in the front lines. Enough of this. I don't want to settle for 5% increase, 2% increase, 3 more women CEOs. I'm angry. And I think, but I do believe as a deeply spiritual person that the more we infuse the cosmos with this energy and thoughtfulness of change and the consciousness that we're changing the path of women and people who came before us, that we're changing the path of people who came, who will come after us. And I think for me, at least, I came to see my leadership as an intense work on myself, first and foremost. And it's uncomfortable. And as I said, I lost my way. I remember I got really taken in by the power and right, like more than once I became this very arrogant person who, there is a lure of consumerism and wealth and power that all the social structures that are linear and hierarchical in definitely in the capitalistic system of economy, but also I come from communism, so it wasn't really much better there, because at the end of the day, you realize that both of these exist on the same vibration of consciousness, right? Which is hierarchical, which is oppressive, which is unequally distributed. And so change really is a lot about pushing for change in real world, and seeing ourselves as change agents, but it's a lot about infusing more of the consciousness out there with what's in our heads, because we are part of all that is. That's very clear to me. So I've come to see leadership as re-owning all parts of me, the warrior, the spiritual woman, the mother, the nurturer, being comfortable with being someone that other people don't think I should be. And breaking these social norms really requires incredible courage, but we're warriors. So we have that courage in us. And in my case, I came here as an immigrant with poor English. I studied literature. I was going to be a literature professor. I actually came here to dance with a dance company. And then I became this businesswoman. And throughout my career, people look at me with incredible disbelief. And people would come to me and say, how did you do that? Our beliefs about who can be successful, and can this woman who does not come from Queens or Western and does not really speak that great of an English, she cannot be that smart, or she cannot be the CEO of a large corporation, for God's sake. So there was so much friction. I guess I just got stubborn. And I think I had courage. I think I had courage that women have more courage than, we know what to do with. But I had courage to step into those roles. Society would say you're not ready. Society would say you're not a likely candidate. Society would say, oh, you can't do it. You didn't go to Queens. You don't have the network. You don't have the money. You don't have anybody behind it. But I think if we look at those as just the artificial lies about who can do what, right? That society has agreed upon, we can start to break them. And it's not easy, for sure. I was insulted so many times. Of course, I was, approached inappropriately, or people thought that, there's this great looking babe and she's in this position. Like there were so many insinuations. But I think to persevere and to have courage to keep stepping in and drawing on that commitment on your leadership path, of course, it's not going to be easy. You don't want to play with an easy opponent, because you can only become stronger if a lot is standing in your way. And, along the way, I had cancer that was pretty advanced, and I lost my mom. And there are many, many, many stories and narratives. And I think light and healing, darkness and light, very interesting and ever-present concepts that are, I think, with us each day, right? And the idea of transforming the light, transforming the darkness into the light, and really dancing with the universe. We're dancing with the universe. We're showing up, and we're being both yielding and assertive, right? That's kind of the paradox. And I think women are just honestly so much more in tune with the rhythms of the light and darkness, and the growth and the change and the transformation, right? That was such a long-winded answer. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but yeah, that's what it means to me.
Beautiful. It's so beautiful. I want you to know, Marina, that I'm going to be pushing and lighting a fire around this particular Gather for Her being one of the main ones that we offer to those who are just discovering Powerhouse, because everything you just said is very much where I'll speak for me, feel like we're invited to step into now. And in our new season of Gather for Her, in our new season of 2021, moving towards 2030, what you beautifully pulled together is where it's just what I want everybody to hear. And what I'd love to ask you a little bit about, you have this incredible way of articulating the activation of consciousness. That's how I would put it. It's the way you understand warriorship from your perspective, the way that you invite us to activate our vulnerability in an embodied, fierce way. I would say that's where I would put it. And there's so many things I could unpack here. I would really love to hear a little bit about not the moment you lost your way, but how you course corrected, or what that was like for you. How did you even know that you'd lost your way? Because I think when the word lure, the lure is a very big, powerful word that I think has a lot of blind spots until we know we've been lured. We don't even know we've been lured until we're wake up to it. So is there anything you could offer us just about what that experience was like and how it shifted for you, or how you shifted it?
I think, I mean, there are many, there are many eyes that we have that some develop early conditioning, what we're told, how to be successful, what to do, what is valued, what's not valued. I think we're all on such a learning journey. I think you have, and people can awake in so many different ways, really so many different ways. I think for me, as someone, I mean, first of all, I was always intensely spiritual. And though I come from a particular spiritual framework, I was always incredibly interested in everything else, and I studied it. And that really was, I think, early on, just a way for me to deal with the darkness of my own family and the tragedies that they experienced, and to try and understand. And I think, so I became early on committed to my own learning and growth. And I think that helped, right? Because when I lost my way, I noticed that I became someone else. I actually, one day I was on my way to, I was making so much money. I fell for the whole thing of being this unexpected executive that is super successful in this system. And it made me feel good. I mean, there is a lots of energy that we can gain from things that is not good for us. That's not a good energy, but it's a high. It's a high. I mean, the whole system runs on those highs, right? So I remember going to a pedicure in Yorkville, and I was running late. I had a Prada bag. It's so funny. And some person who wasn't me, who was, poor and lost and looked disheveled, and he approached me and he asked me where the Salvation Army was. And I literally brushed him off and just said, I don't know, I'm late. I don't know what happened, but I literally walked 5 more meters and I fell. And I looked back, and he had this backpack with like 3 hearts on it. So I was just like jarred out of whoever I was, whoever I became. So I really see it as a grace of Goddess, universe, that gave me this. And then from there on, the humbleness came back to me, right? I think maintaining humbleness and the fact that we really don't know so much, while also feeling fierce and empowered and understanding that we do know, we're part of it. Like, we could know more, but it just requires all this work. So I think that was it for me. I think there was that event and something snapped, and I realized how far I've gone from my ideals, from my core, from whatever is that I really value. My cancer was a real light in my life. And I think that, I know people say that, but you really realize something very profound. You realize what gratitude really means and what being on that higher level of consciousness really feels like. Unfortunately, we lose it because it's hard to maintain that. It's hard to maintain that in a normal course of life. We always default to this very narrow consciousness and very fear-based, and we go around and but I think there are many obstacles. There are many obstacles. Of course, there is also spiritual pride, that you think you're now evolved and you know better than everybody else. And that probably is like the worst. When the moment you think, the moment we think we're better than other people, the moment we think that's really the curse of this world. That's the division, which is, of course, not true spiritually and in the real. We're all connected. So the moment you have that consciousness that because you go to church or you read or you pray, that somehow you're now better, the spiritual pride is a really, really, really dangerous thing. And I think for me, maintaining or working hard to maintain that consciousness of humility while also being a powerful woman who's managing, and trying to, get away from judgment about myself and judgment about others. It's complicated. And every day I slip a million times, right? I slip a million times and then I pull myself back in. I think the way we are, we have to judge. We see each other, we judge right away. I think, one in the Old Testament, there is one story where it says like, we count people, and counting really means immediately putting people in certain drawers, right? So I think to really get away from, that duality, which we all experience every second, and it does involve often you feeling superior for whatever reason, or because of your pain, or because you're more spiritual, or because your wealth, or because of your, so that to me is a very hard work. Very hard work, but I don't know how people get jarred out of things through illness, through tragedy. I mean, it's really interesting when we read the stories about heroes' journeys and narratives of our lives and ancestors. We see those patterns very often, right?
I think we're offered, one of the things that I'm hearing from you is we're offered the opportunity to either transform our pain or to transmute it. And we're always offered that. And you come from a legacy from your mother and your grandmother of transforming pain into power. And where I want to go now a little bit is actually your work with charities, because sometimes when we hear the word charity, people think, they almost take a power over perspective, right? Oh, I'm being generous, and and this goes back to the story you told, the beautiful, very powerful story that just overwhelmed all of us about falling, right? And realizing that how interconnected we are. And when I think about the word charity, I think about it from a place of, I think we've misconstrued it, but it comes from a place of generosity. I have been given so much, and I'm a recipient of all the generosity from where I live, where I've been born, the opportunities that I've had. And so that charity is just recognizing that it's just transforming and passing on that generosity of what is actually not yours to begin with, right? That everything is a gift, and that I get to be in flow of a gift. And so that's kind of where my thinking is going now. And how much did that influence you then with your work in charities?
It's very, very inspiring to be connected to so many charities and to so many amazing people, very often women, who have chosen this life of service to others, or life of fighting for cause, or for animals or the planet or the environment, really against incredible odds, right? Barely surviving in a very suboptimal way and still going on. One thing that I noticed right away, I mean, I was always connected to charities and, sat on boards and stuff, but I really dig deeper this time, and I met with hundreds of smaller charities across the country. And right away I said, maybe like second or third month, I said, there is I feel like a higher level of frequency in this space because of that choice, because of the choice so many of these people are made. And I think, to me, spiritually, charity really is about recognizing that we're all connected, and that absolutely nothing is ours to give. So it's really about, again, the consciousness, right? Because when you give to someone, they're actually doing you a favor. They're giving to you. They're giving to you. There is a story that I read, I don't know which spiritual tradition, but it really affected me in that, a rich man is asking a beggar to please let him give. And the beggar, after a while, said, okay, you can give it to me. But it really, so many things that we think should be just upside down, because they are upside down in reality. And so the charity is such a profound concept. Unfortunately, in the world and in society, it also has very patriarchal roots, very kind of welfare, disempowering, Victorian roots of kind of handing out things because often very ego-driven, should not be. But it has that same patriarchal underpinnings that are destroying the rest of this world and resources, that are about, charity, as in, powerful and rich are giving to people who are not so. And it really, when I look at it from the systems perspective, of course, charity is also enabled by deep inequality in other areas of our lives. Charity is enabled by lack of resources, by lack of access to resources, by lack of access to education and opportunities, right? So in many ways, the way it's set up, of course, it's wonderful and it's important. And I'm making generalizations that, of course, are not true for everybody. But there is something about the way people think about charity. And I got to tell you, I mean, I worked in a for-profit sector for a long time. When I became somebody who works in the charitable sector, I often felt that people thought either it's really easy and this is like a hobby, or the skill set involved in this is lesser. I was like, why did you abandon this, cool for-profit technology space? And they're just, generally speaking, many misconceptions. And people think that charity should be done on the cheap, and that nothing, things should not be invested. And I mean, I'm glad this has changed, but why do food banks? Why is somebody taking expired cans of beans to food banks, for God's sake, right? Like that's wrong. That's that fundamentally, wrong attitude that I think has also given, really is the root source of so many troubles in the world. The same one that, but so I think we need to change that as well, because we have it upside down. Why is it okay that somebody who's producing shoes should be investing into their factory, and somebody who's producing solutions for human suffering or child poverty or child trafficking should not be? It's like upside down, right? It's an upside down. Like, we should be not bargaining with these things. We should be bargaining when we go and buy expensive pair of shoes. So, however, I've come to deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate the charitable sector. Many tens of thousands of people who are making lives and things better for someone every day. And as I said, often under crazy circumstances of not having technology, not having computers, not having any money to really do anything. They are, and is this sector that I think it's like redeeming every other sector. It's like a redeeming sector for all the stuff that we're messing up in all other ways. So it's interesting, and I think when people go in, they recognize that. And, you know, of course, if you had somebody from private equity come with extremely for-profit point of view, they would say, well, there are so many charities, and, you know, we just cannot have the same measurement or the same point of view. I remember maybe in the second, third week, I met a mother who was single-handedly finding a cure for a really rare disorder that her daughter had. And her daughter was in the next room. She worked out of the kitchen. She became a beacon of hope for a handful of parents across the world whose children had the same disorder that was not supported because it's so small. And when I met her, this mother out of her kitchen was this close to finding the cure. There was a cure in the phase 3 final trials. So, you know, where do you put a story like that? That's not a story for private equity. That's a story for spiritual point of view, the point of view of nothing's too small if it helps someone, right? So I think there are lots of issues in the sector because of the way we see it, and because of the way, as I said, the roots of the charitable is very Victorian, very patriarchal. And it's also riding on society that is disempowering to many groups of people in not giving them access or not enabling access in the same way that other groups of people have. And that's access to capital as well.
I would like to jump in if I could. Everything you said just resonates very, very much with me, and I'm sure everybody here on the panel and in everybody here. I'm here to offer an Indigenous lens to the conversation. And so, you know, yes, I was nodding when you said the system is patriarchal. I'm curious. I read an article recently about by an executive director of the Native Women's Resource Center, and this was written in 2016. That organization is in Toronto. I don't know if you know of it, but she said there were not many Indigenous organizations fundraising. And she further went on to say that what makes fundraising in Indigenous communities interesting is Canadians have not typically been asked to help. So historically, Canadians have not been invited to engage with Indigenous issues, nor have they asked for help or support. But now, with the release of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the inquiry, you know, the inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women, we're educating Canadians on the histories of the 60s scoop, and all of those atrocities that Indigenous people have been facing. I'm just wondering if that has changed. So that was in 2016, so that was 5 years ago. And then the other part of that question is, what does truth and reconciliation mean in the philanthropic sector? And it's a deep question, but I can't help but ask that because of, you know, like I know that many Indigenous communities rely on their charitable status for fundraising, and yet I don't know where that is going, and if you see many of them within your work.
Yeah, it is a very deep question, and I don't know that I am the best to answer it in its totality, which I think, well, we at Canada Helps, we have done and are doing some things that we can do. We launched a couple of Indigenous-based funds, and we have promoted them extensively, and I love them. We're enabling Indigenous groups that are qualified donees to get onto the Canada Helps platform, and we have promoted the Truth and Reconciliation report. And but the charitable sector is also dominated by patriarchal, white male, same systems. I don't know if I can give this a fair thing, but this to me is a change. It's another kind of change thing that will be slow and painful, but that I think each one of us has to find a way on how they can best contribute to it. And I don't have a good grasp on Canadians in general and what they think, and do they give a damn or not, and who does and who doesn't. And it's another consciousness thing, because the moment you realize that this country will never be okay, because we're sitting on this energy of genocide that is still there. So that's like a limiting factor for all of us. So how can we change that? But I think we're just working on our giving report, which we do every year, and there is actually something hopeful that we saw this year, and I think we saw it. We saw it in the interim report, but we see that the donations to Indigenous, either Indigenous-led charities or for Indigenous causes, have actually gone up.
Wonderful.
They still represent like a tiniest of percentages, right? But there is something there moving. And is it because of the Truth and Reconciliation? Is it because, Mother Earth, COVID are kind of infusing some thoughts in our heads to start thinking about things that are beyond, here and now and our immediate preoccupations.
Wonderful.
So that's as much as I can say. We do have 2 funds on Canada Helps that I'm very, very proud of, and I encourage everyone to go and see them under our funds. We promote them, and sometimes we get pushed back, right? I think what is the education around this, right? And how do you motivate more people to think more deeply about this, right?
This comes back to what you said right at the beginning, that leadership is a calling, right? And that it is a responsibility. And you think about, again, I've talked at the beginning about the ripple effect. And so here's 81 people on the call. Keep having the conversations, raise the level of consciousness, keep talking about it. And like you said, it's slow and it's messy and it's uncomfortable. Stay in the discomfort, stay in the room. And that belongs to everyone here. It is your responsibility, my responsibility, to elevate that conversation and stay in the room for that. So this really comes back to exactly what you started with, the reminder that it is our job to change the world as individuals, and then at the collective consciousness, right? It is my story, it's our story, and then the story, right, Tina?
Wow. I wanted to thank you, Marina, for your thoughtful answers and your honesty about, Sharon's questions are there. There is so much to unpack there, and I think my ask would be, I'm going to look up the 2 funds. I'm going to make sure that I know about them and we share them. My ask will be that if someone comes across your path that you feel would be really important for us to invite a conversation, because Sharon's question deserves a full gather for her to continue to explore and unpack that.
Okay.
But even, you know, bringing it up today and just starting to just have a bit of that conversation. You know, every time we have the conversation, it's a bit of healing. It's a bit of, you know, a bit of sharing. It is my job to kind of pull us back and just, I just want to be reflective and respectful of time. I'm going to invite us each to just have a couple of, you know, closing thoughts. I will kick it off by saying I understand now why Jayanne wanted me to meet with you in a way that she probably at the time had no idea of, but I'm just very grateful for that. And I think on a personal level, I am absolutely gobsmacked by your grace and your grit and your greatness, however challenging it might be for you to hear that. And I'm hopeful because I wrote down, she is here. And every time I meet someone who is a powerful CEO making change that is conscious, I'm like, wow, she is here. Thank you.
I'll go next. I think the words that really resonate in this space for me, Marina, is actually came from you and spoken by Christina, which was the word transmute, and this understanding of one family and this understanding of spiritual pride, and even the where I go, and it actually just came up in a conversation I had yesterday, so it really rang for me. This I wonder if we might be brave enough to put down our meaning around the word calling and remember that there can be spiritual pride in that word too. And that as we as individuals step into the medicine that we just innately can offer the world, the calling, that calling thing, that potential divisive word of calling, not for all of us, but some of us really go, am I called? Am I not called? Well, they're called. And it's that transmutation of each of us holding the walk, bravely walking forward. So thank you for all that you bring to this conversation and the catalysts of thought for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I want to pick up on one of the things that Tina said, and that is it's not about our role or our title. Our job is to lead from wherever we are, and we're called to leadership from that intrinsic gifting, and that calling actually comes, I think, through us rather than from us, and so what I almost issue a challenge to everybody who's listening to this is how can I invite those choice points to live consciously every day, and live consciously from a place of leading my own life and influencing the collective in my leadership, because all of us are called to do that, to live at that level of consciousness that transforms pain, that transforms patriarchy, that transforms marginalization, and heals the world. And that means all of us. So thank you.
Oh, well said, both Christina, Tina, and Shar. Thank you so much, Marina, for being here. And I would absolutely love to have another conversation with you. Incredible. What you said at the beginning, as we change, the world changes. If we want better, we have to be better. And, the way to do that is to infuse the cosmos in every aspect of our lives. And we all are one family. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it being in this sphere of consciousness. And we could have talked about so many more things that are part of this and overcoming this. And it's a lot. It's a lot for one conversation, but I really am very grateful for this. In the meantime, I actually did find out the exact names of these two funds that are to be found on Canada Helps under ways to donate. One is called the Indigenous Culture and Language Resurgence in the Canadian North Fund, and another one is called the Indigenous People Solidarity Fund.
Thank you. We will be sure to share both of those links in our follow-up. And yeah, thank you for your presence. It was a really, really incredible conversation, and we're just really grateful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, you guys.
Thank you.
Take care.